Will you tell me the story of our Masonic home?
Certainly, my son, but there are many others that lead to this one. You should know some of the challenges that have been faced by our Masonic forefathers, and those challenges you will meet.
I'm more than willing to listen and learn, and hopefully to accept the challenges.
If you accept them, my son, the future of Freemasonry in Virginia, yea, possibly everywhere, will be strengthened by your generation. What we have faced in the past may be as naught compared to what lies ahead of you.
I can only pray, sir, that my generation will be worthy of the trust you place in us.
I know it will. Come with me through the pages of history. By understanding the past, you will better appreciate the Masonic heritage that is yours to preserve and advance. You must build on the past, and you must continue to put into practice Freemasonry's great tenet, brotherly love. But above all things, you must place God. Now, let us go to Williamsburg and witness the founding of the first independent Grand Lodge in America. Several conventions have been meeting here in Williamsburg since May 6, 1777, to discuss the feasibility of electing a Grand Master for Virginia.
Now that we have determined there are a sufficient number of lodges represented to conduct our business, and we have determined that the authority of no Masonic officer in North America exists, I will put this question. It is the opinion of this convention that all regular chartered lodges within Virginia should be subject to the Grand Master of this state. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nothing remains but the election of a Grand Master. The Right Worshipful Brother John Blair, Jr. has been nominated for this honorable office, and he has agreed to accept this responsibility if elected. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Right Worshipful Brother Andrews, may I say a word?
I gladly recognize Right Worshipful Brother William Wardell of Williamsburg.
After 18 months of patient and Masonic intercourse, you ought to be congratulated at the arrival of this historic moment. You have now elected a Grand Master for the first independent Grand Lodge in America.
All that remains is for this convention to determine the best date to install the Grand Master and the officers he appoints to serve with him.
Right Worshipful.
I recognize Right Worshipful Duncan Rose of Blandford.
Your committee has considered the date. Time should be allowed for all the lodges to be notified of this action. An opportunity to send delegates should be allowed. It recommends that the Grand Master and his officers be installed here in the lodge at Williamsburg on the 30th day of October of this year, 1778.
Do I hear any objections to this recommendation? This convention now stands adjourned.
Thank you, sir, for permitting me to be a part of this historic moment when the Reverend Robert Andrews presided at the election of John Blair as Grand Master of the first independent Grand Lodge in America. But does this mean that Freemasonry has just begun in America?
No, indeed. But we do not know exactly when it arrived on our shore. There may have been Masons among the 104 male settlers who arrived in Jamestown on May 13, 1607. We do know that Freemasonry had been an honored society in Scotland and England for 300 years by then. Freemasons may have been among the Pilgrims who landed in Massachusetts 13 years later. It was not until the 18th century that we had fragmentary evidence that Freemasons were active in the American colonies.
Why don't we know more than we do?
Records, such as they were in the early days, have been destroyed by fire and other calamities, and far too much stress has been placed on secrecy.
I've noticed that, yet Masonry isn't a secret organization. Its members are known, its meeting places are marked, its proceedings are available to anyone.
True, and its teachings based on the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God are shared with all people everywhere.
Where did Freemasonry start in Virginia?
Circumstantial evidence places a Masonic lodge in Norfolk as early as 1733. Records were lost in 1776 when only one building was left standing. It appears that one met in the Royal Exchange Tavern and that the lodge at Norfolk that participated in the formation of our Grand Lodge is a direct descendant of it. The capital of Virginia was moved from Jamestown in 1699. There may have been Masons who moved to the new capital in Williamsburg. We do know from newspaper accounts that Masonry was active there at least as early as 1751.
I understand George Washington was made a Mason in the lodge at Fredericksburg in 1752. When was that lodge formed?
We do not know. Its first recorded meeting took place on September 1, 1752. 2 months later, Washington was initiated. It was in this lodge at Fredericksburg that the first recorded conferral of the Royal Arch degree took place, and that happened on December 22, 1753. Along the banks of the Rappahannock River, Fort Kilwinning Cross Lodge was formed in 1754.
It appears that Masonry was first established near rivers. Was this because of their easy access?
Yes. Blandford and Cabin Point Royal Arch Lodges were located along the Appomattox and James Rivers. St. Tammany Lodge is near the bay in Hampton. Botetourt Lodge was near the York River. So was Yorktown Lodge.
The greatest day in the history of the United States occurred here at Yorktown on October 19, 1781. The British surrendered to our brother George Washington, and freedom was won for all Americans.
It is almost unbelievable. All Americans should thank God for giving us George Washington, the right man in the right place at the right time.
But we must never forget the thousands of other patriots who fought alongside him. And we should proudly hail the Virginians who fought over a wider field of operations than those from any other colony.
And we can be proud of our good brother, Peyton Randolph, the first president of the First Continental Congress. Washington served with him.
Then George Washington became the first president of the United States. And wasn't he worshipful master of his lodge at the same time?
Yes, and the only one ever to serve in both capacities at the same time. And he appointed our first Grand Master, John Blair, to the Supreme Court of the United States. Our third Grand Master, Edmund Randolph, was one of Washington's aides during the war and became the first Attorney General of the United States, later becoming Secretary of State. Our second Grand Master was James Mercer. He was a member of the first Supreme Court of Appeals of Virginia, later becoming its chief. Even before he became one of our Grand Masters, John Marshall was Secretary of State, and then became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
I know the list can go on, but how long did our Grand Lodge meet in Williamsburg?
The capital was moved to Richmond in 1780. So, during the meeting of the Grand Lodge held in Raleigh Tavern, the delegates voted to move to Richmond. It was during this meeting that Richmond Lodge, the first entirely new lodge, was chartered. Richmond Lodge needed a home. So did our Grand Lodge. In 1785, the officers petitioned the Assembly for permission to hold a lottery to raise funds to build this temple. In August 1785, Grand Master James Mercer presided at the laying of the cornerstone of our state capitol. In October, the cornerstone of this temple was laid. It was a busy year.
I note that Edmund Randolph chartered 3 new lodges in 1786, Stanton, Manchester, and Petersburg.
And each of them played important roles in our Grand Lodge. Stanton, for instance, would provide 8 Grand Masters, and a 9th would preside at the 200th annual communication.
It's good to see that it didn't take long for Masonry to move inland to add strength to our Grand Lodge.
This old building has been in the midst of the history of our Commonwealth and nation. One of the great moments took place in 1824 with John Marshall presiding.
No American will ever forget the debt owed our honored guest, General Gilbert M. de Lafayette. It was he who, at his own expense, raised a French army to come to the aid of our colonies when that aid was sorely needed. It was he who suffered, along with our good brother, George Washington, during the trying days of the War for American Independence. Happily, he was beside that same brother 50 miles from here when the British surrendered at Yorktown. You are heartily welcomed, Brother Lafayette, to Richmond, Virginia, and the United States of America.
There must have been millions of great men like Lafayette. For Freemasonry, like every good organization, is but the lengthening shadow of men dedicated to its purposes for existence.
You are wise, my son, and it was men like them who carried Freemasonry from the eastern shore to Cumberland Gap and even deeper into our mountains. When the war between the states erupted, there were 182 lodges within our boundaries.
I understand the teachings of Masonry were equally observed by the Masons of the North and the South.
They were. While other organizations and even homes were torn asunder, Freemasons wearing the blue and gray practiced the beautiful lessons they had learned in our lodges. In this temple in December 1861, Grand Master John Robin McDaniel struck a note that would be followed throughout the Civil War.
We are bound to protect our families, our property, and ourselves. But, the battle over, visit the field of carnage and give the most extended scope to your Masonic feelings. Administer to the sufferers all the comforts at your command. Treat kindly those whom the fortunes of war have thrown in your power, regarding that a fallen and prostrate foe is no longer our enemy, but conquered, he should excite our pity.
It would appear the only light that blazed forth during those 4 bitter years was that of Freemasonry. Many Masons lost their lives during that struggle. Our Grand Lodge was particularly unfortunate. Near Waynesboro, during the closing days of the war, our Grand Master, Colonel William H. Harmon, was killed. Northern Masons were compassionate in the manner in which they treated the citizens of the Confederacy when the war ended. The Mason who commanded the Federal forces ordered the starving people fed and clothed. A Massachusetts Mason named Atherton Stevens placed guards about this old temple to save it from looting and destruction. After the fall of Richmond, Masons from both sides met here on many occasions.
That's brotherhood in action. And it continued when at the close of the war, a future president of the United States, William McKinley, a major in the Federal Army, was made a Mason in Winchester Hiram Lodge, with Freemasons from both sides participating.
And the Grand Lodge of West Virginia was formed by lodges holding Virginia charters in that same year of 1865. In 1800, the same thing had happened in Kentucky.
In 1878, our Grand Lodge was 100 years old and meeting in St. Albans Hall in Richmond. Was there a celebration?
No, among other things, yellow fever was raging. But let Grand Master Beverly R. Welford, Jr. tell the story.
Because of a pestilence that walketh in darkness, and the destruction that wasteth at noonday, and because our Grand Lodge has but little money, I do not think it proper to hold a celebration of our 100th anniversary as a Grand Lodge. The best and most satisfactory manner in which we can commemorate the centennial anniversary is with earnest gratitude for the past, with simple faith for the future, and with resolute, determined will in the present.
A most important event occurred here in Yorktown in 1881 on the 100th anniversary of the surrender of the British. Our Grand Lodge was invited by a joint session of Congress to lay the cornerstone of Victory Monument.
But Masons have been laying cornerstones for centuries. What made this so important?
Masonry had gone through 2 decades of persecution and condemnation. That began in 1826. The anti-Masons gained nothing. Then came the unfortunate war between the states. To have the Grand Lodge of the once Confederate capital officiate in such an historic event must be classed as a triumph for Freemasonry. It proved that the lessons taught in our lodges are spread far and wide.
I understand the year 1889 was also most important.
Indeed it was. It was the year Dr. George Potts asked his friend Alexander G. Babcock to have lunch with him during the Grand Lodge session. The result was a far-reaching report to Grand Lodge.
A few days ago, your committee appointed to look into the feasibility of establishing a refuge for Masonic orphans could see no reason for reporting favorably. But just as we were about to put this in writing, it accidentally came to our knowledge that Brother A.G. Babcock was willing to donate several $1,000s to start the enterprise. Your committee therefore reports that it is expedient to establish a Masonic home, and that the name be the Masonic Home of Virginia.
Babcock was appointed to the first Board of Governors of the Home and became its first president. Early in 1890, a matron and 8 boys moved in. A movement was started on February 22, 1910, to build a lasting memorial to the country's most famous Freemason. Over 50,000 people were present when our Grand Lodge laid the cornerstone in 1923. That marked the beginning of the George Washington Masonic National Memorial. 9 years later, past Grand Master Charles H. Callahan presided at the dedication ceremonies. The thousands of words of oratory on that day were summed up in this sentence: "This memorial, with its doors open to all, symbolizes a Freemasonry which welcomes and bids Godspeed to all who worship God in spirit and in truth, by whatever name they call him."
I now appreciate more than ever this temple that I've seen by day and night. I am particularly proud to know it belongs to all the Masons of the country.
Tuberculosis was raging throughout Virginia in 1923. Grand Master Charles H. Callahan asked the Masons to contribute toward the building of what was to become the George W. Wright Memorial Pavilion near Charlottesville for tubercular patients. After its formal opening, it was turned over to the Commonwealth of Virginia.
It's good to know that Freemasons are always willing to help when the need is known.
Some of our lodges have done more for their communities than is realized. Marshall Lodge number 39 in Lynchburg, whose charter was signed by John Marshall, built a hospital in 1885 and supported it until 1969, when it was merged with the General Hospital to become Lynchburg General Marshall Lodge Hospital. Danville was the first city in Virginia to declare war on tuberculosis. Roman Eagle Lodge number 122 joined the fight. When the war was won, the lodge became the rallying point for a nursing home. In 1962, this lodge laid the cornerstone for Roman Eagle Memorial Home.
I'm sure it would take volumes to tell the story of what our lodges and their members have done for their communities. And I understand we're still helping our veterans.
We certainly are. During World War II, a program of Masonic hospital visitation was started. So well was this accepted that today many voluntary organizations are serving in our VA hospitals along with our Masonic field agents.
Wasn't this program an outgrowth of Freemasonry's work for our armed forces?
Yes, and our Grand Lodge joined in this endeavor to provide our servicemen and women with homes away from home. Through the pages of our Masonic Herald, our brethren were asked to help. They generously opened their hearts and purse strings to make it possible for these centers to operate.
Do you think this desire to help our fellow man comes from the emphasis placed on our ritual?
Grand Master John T. Cochran said he did during Grand Lodge in 1929.
Believing that a perfect knowledge of the ritual inspires greater and deeper interest in one's masonry and creates a burning desire to render acceptable service to his lodge and to his fellow men, I have established 3 permanent schools of instruction at Wachaprague on the Eastern Shore, at Fairfax Hall, Waynesboro, and VPI, Blacksburg. Aside from the great benefit derived in learning the ritual, I regard the social life and the intimate friendships formed at the schools of inestimable value to the craft.
These schools have met without exception since 1929. The one in the Valley is now named in memory of John T. Cochran.
After our old Grand Lodge temple was sold, a new home was built on the grounds of the Masonic home. And I was here on that cold day in February 1972.
It certainly was cold. Even so, Masons and their families came from miles around to witness the ceremonies.
Now that it's close to what has been called the capstone of Virginia Freemasonry, it should continually remind us that every human being has a claim upon us.
We have accomplished much, but there is more to be done. When our home was founded, our craft numbered less than 9,000. As the craft grew, so did the need for the home. At the height of the Depression in 1932, we had 263 children. The cornerstone of this infirmary was laid in 1935. For 40 years, it served the home. Laws and conditions change. A modern, efficient care center had to be built. In 1975, the cornerstone was laid. It was dedicated in 1976, and our youth groups played important roles, as they often do. Our DeMolays have been active in Virginia for over 50 years. So have our Job's Daughters and our Rainbow Girls since 1974. In 1954, a plea went out for additional funds to build a home for the elderly Masons, their wives, and their widows. The building was dedicated in 1955, and before the year was over, it was filled to capacity. Another wing was added 5 years later.
How did our Grand Lodge participate in the bicentennial of our country?
Special events were held from one end of the Commonwealth to the other. A typical one took place in Richmond. Many of the Grand Lodge officers and dozens of dignitaries added to the festivity.
Our theme for the year is Freemasonry, our heritage and our promise. Many of the great patriots who played an important role in the formation of our government were active in Freemasonry.
Brother Mills E. Godwin, Governor of the Commonwealth, was the principal speaker for the occasion.
May I applaud the efforts and the dedication of the Masons in Virginia as they celebrate our bicentennial with 5 great events around our Commonwealth. And certainly I am honored and privileged to have the chance to be with you here this evening in Richmond. In the greatness that is America, in the strength that is this country and its freedoms, and we can give eloquent testimony in the years and days ahead that life in America is good, because this country is great, and this country is great because she is good.
Masonry has taught me to love my country more than ever before. It has given me a closer tie with my church. It has shown me the value we must place on the future of our youth. And its other priceless jewels, friendship and brotherly love, have values we just can't determine.
And how can it be explained, my son? There are no words to explain the mystic tie that binds Freemasons together. My son, you have traveled with your forefathers through more than 3 centuries in the history of our Commonwealth. You have learned something of our gentle craft. You have learned that our principles have stood the test of time. We have learned how to assist the unfortunate, comfort the sorrowing, Offer a benevolent heart to those in need, and be just to all. The future of Virginia, our country, and Freemasonry is now placed in your hands and in those of your generation. Will you accept the challenge to fulfill the mission of Freemasonry, to bring to all men everywhere the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God?
With God's help, I accept the challenge.